Jim, thank you for hitting recording. That was the next thing I was going to ask for. Can you guys see that PowerPoint okay?
Yes.
Okay. Check my attendee list again. Well, welcome everybody. Here we are on the 4th of April. We are screaming toward the end of the administrative rulemaking. I appreciate everybody being here. We have a special guest again today. Welcome, Mo, for coming back and visiting with us. And as you know, we still have quite a few things to get through, but we're almost there. I'm gonna, since we are recording this meeting, I'll just go through the scope and the guidelines again in case somebody jumps in on the tail end of and views this video. Oh, I don't think we need to do introductions. I don't see any new faces in either the attendee list or the panelist list. So as I've mentioned before, it's a big job and we've had a tough schedule, and I do truly appreciate all my TAC members' volunteer time and the stakeholder groups that have also participated. Priority time will be given to the TAC members. Guests are welcome to comment by raising their hand in the meeting. For new members of the public, remember the following will help you get up to speed. That's our controlling statute. That's Colorado Revised Statute Section 2432, 3301 through 3329. The tiny home bill is passed, which is HB 221242. The administrative rules 8 CCR 1302-14. Those are the existing rules that were approved, and those are the ones that we are talking about amending and submitting to the State Housing Board. And then all the previous TAC meeting recordings will give you also a history on where we've been on this journey. So we're only addressing tiny homes as defined by statute, not RV models, park homes, tiny homes without wheels, etc. We're only addressing Colorado law and Colorado rules. And then for the foundation piece of this, that's for local jurisdictions that do not have a building department. And then of course, we will follow the guidance language in HB 221242 regarding different codes, small production concerns, etc. And then regarding the different codes and standards, if things do come up in the future, we can point to Administrative Rule 215, which allows alternatives to be considered. And then to keep us moving, if anybody does have comments, I would appreciate them to be in the form of language for the rule change or new rule moving forward. So here's where we are so far with the changes since the 328 meeting. I kind of wanted to go through this list. Again, you guys are going to have to bear with me as I take notes and keep track of everything. I'm also watching the participant lists to see if anybody is raising their hands. And then I'm also watching the chat in case anybody wants to utilize the chat. Quite a bit of grammaring and numbering changes since last time. Just going down through the bullets now back to the slide deck. We're looking at, we added an amendment to Appendix Q. At the end of that, we added egress from the loft or loft landing must be accessible. That had to deal with the height restriction that we were putting in there for the loft landing and allowing egress from that loft landing. So that was a suggestion that came from the tiny home industry that we just put in. Rule 2.5.1.1, we deleted that dielectric strength test. And then as a result of renumbering that, that moved the B to A. The 2.777, that this was the section in IECC. We removed the strike throughs and recommended leaving it as is for now. And then we'll refer back to the TAC for resolution. We had a lot of good discussion on that last time, but I don't think we have it resolved yet. And in this parens, I put it might be done before 4/5. I'm not sure we can get it done before 4/5. So it's something that we may have to continue to work on. Fee schedule, we actually put in numbers now for multifamily IBC installation fee and multifamily IBC inspection fee. So that's $270 per inspection address plus an additional multi-box fee of $25 per box. All day fee may be determined if necessary, and then multi-day fees will be require extra fees for lodging and food if it's requires it. All right, so Nate, guys bear with me. I've had some participants pop back in. Justin, Nate, and Tracy, I've promoted you to panelists. And then as a suggestion from 328 to deal with the 3-year registration and to deal with the expiration of plans, what we put in there, this is the last bullet on this page, new plans submitted within 120 days of the manufacturer's registration expiration date will not be required to resubmit plans for renewal until the next registration cycle. If the factory fails to register on time due to fault of their own, those plans are no longer valid and will be required to be renewed. The asset for that structure is required to have been created and construction started before the expiration to be exempt from the renewal process for that specific plan and structure. Anybody, and I see a panelist hand go up. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Could you remind me how your plan review group works in relation to when the Division of Housing updates any of their codes, which would, I guess, in this case, be both the IBC for the on the multifamily commercial side and then IRC, and also in relation to the upcoming state energy code? Do you give a grace period to the permits or plans that are submitted and when they need to be updated? I know in Broomfield, we update our codes every 3 years, and then we require all the master plans to be updated by that time. So I was just curious how your group handles that. Thank you.
And so I want to make sure I heard you right. So you're asking about how we deal with IECC on multifamily?
No, just generally across the board with all
Okay.
the adopted codes. So you've got, whatever, I forget which
Gotcha.
version you're on.
So our adopted codes are our adopted codes. If we change or update a code, we allow 180 days for those factories to correct those to change their plans going forward, right? But we do give a 180-day grace period. The Division of Housing can extend that another 180 days if they need to. We also, now IECC is a little different. We are currently on the 2015 IECC, but if a local jurisdiction is adopted as far back as 2009, we will still allow that. And that's where we are on that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So I'd like to pause and see if there's any discussions on any of those changes that we made between the last time and this time. Tawny, specifically, I wanted to see if this language might work. And you were speaking on behalf of the industry with respect to plan renewals rolling over from one registration to the other.
And I apologize, Sam. I need to talk with the factories and
Okay.
everybody and see if they like that.
Okay, and then, so Mike and the other factory guys, Dr. Meyer and those guys, if you guys have any comments on that, we'd love to get that feedback really quick. Just to kind of give you an overview of where we are with submitting of this, we did submit draft rules on last Friday. We are going to amend those on this Thursday. So that will be the version that we resubmit on Thursday will be the version that goes out to the entire database for comment, and will be going forward to and then the comments, and it'll be part of this of the State Housing Board meeting on May 9th. Okay, Margarita, I'm going to go back to that slide real quick. I did send out the slide deck to everybody too, so you should have all these if you want to take a look at them after the meeting. If you did not get the slide deck, let me know. Margarita, did you have something you wanted to address on this one?
No, not really, Sam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other
Mo.
comments or questions on this stuff?
Mo has his hand up.
Oh, Mo, I just lowered your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you for lowering my hand, but thank you for finally recognizing I had my hand up. Thank you, Donnie. Yeah, a couple of things. First, just to give people, picking up where Sam left off, this is all in preparation for the rulemaking hearing, which is scheduled for May 9th. What Sam was referring to is the Secretary of State sending out the proposed rules to all folks that are signed up to receive it from them. Also, the Office of Policy Research and Regulatory Reform, which is housed with Department of Regulatory Agencies, DORA. He'll also be sending out to all the folks that are signed up to receive notifications from them. And of course, Sam himself will be sending it out to all the stakeholders he has email addresses with and has been keeping in touch with about this process. So that will all go out after we update what was noticed at the end of last week with whatever comes out of today's discussion. And that document, those proposed rules, are what people can then respond to in the form of either written public comments that will be part of the rulemaking hearing record and consider as part of that process, or they may come in and provide verbal testimony, or both if they would like. So that will give people plenty of opportunity and plenty of notice to really digest what comes out of today's meeting and provide any feedback for consideration as part of that process. Now, that being said, I had a question about 2.7.7. What strike-throughs were removed? And can somebody provide some context about where that's left off? What was actually discussed? So I can catch up.
You bet. Thank you, Mo, for clarifying that information on the State Housing Board too. And we'll talk about that again at the end when we look at the schedule going forward. But on 2.7.7, we had discussion specifically on the section, and that dealt with blower door test, and it also dealt with the air barrier checklist. We had struck through the exemption for that paragraph in 2.77, and so by deleting that exemption, then that generated discussion on whether or not an air blower door test was required. Robbie is not here, but he believed that a blower door test was required after installation for every unit. And there was discussion on whether or not there was a need for that. The tiny home industry didn't have a lot of concern on that, but the manufacturers had some concern on being able to do a blower door test after it left the factory and was installed on site. And so the discussion was around, are there alternate ways to meet the number of air exchanges between 0 and 5, I believe was the number we were targeting on being able to do that some other prescriptive way. And we did not come to a resolution on that. And if I didn't catch that right, somebody else pop up their hand and we will have that discussion. Eric, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering about 2.2.27C. Maybe I missed this because I was multitasking in prior meetings. Egress from the loft or loft landings must be accessible. Are we talking about accessible to people with physical disabilities? Because egress from the loft is not accessible. I mean, we're not going to require an elevator or a 80-foot long ramp. So what does that mean there?
Okay, Eric, yeah, we're going to come back to 2.77 in just a second, but I think I can answer this one. And Donnie and I looked at the wording in the regulations on what a normal egress capability needed to be. It is not for physically disabled or access. It is for just to be able to reach it from that place. So we can change that word, but that was back to the definition of, we looked at the root on egress, and that language came right out of one of the codes, and I'm not sure exactly which one.
Eric, if you look at the definition in the chapter 11 of the IRC, it has accessible in there, and that's where we took the accessible language from, or the term. Because when you look in the IRC, there's not, when you look at the definition section, accessible, it tells you to refer to chapter 11 of the IECC, or not IECC, the IRC.
So chapter 11 is the energy section. I know chapter 11 of the IBC is accessibility. Is it IBC chapter 11 we're talking about?
Nope, IRC. Because like I said, if you look in the IRC
Okay,
for accessible, it refers you to chapter 11.
okay,
It doesn't actually give a definition in chapter 2 of the IRC. It says refer to accessible in chapter 11.
okay. We just got to be careful. Chapter 11 talks about access to, and prior language meant like, an appliance might need to be accessible, or it might have to be provided with readily accessible. But we just want to be careful not to use a term that can be confused with accessibility for disabled, ADA compliance, etc.
Yeah, so if you can come up with a different term that better suits it, but like I said, based off the definition in chapter 2 for accessible, it refers you to chapter 11. So there's not a definition in chapter 2.
Right. Okay, I'll see what I can think about.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to 2.77, and I want to finish
Well, you
that.
might as well finish this conversation because
Okay.
several hands went up because of it. It'd been better if we had finished 2.77 first, but since our ship is already set, left the dock, I would finish it. And you got several people that raise their hands, but you also have a chat from Margarita who's recommending to use the word egress instead. Tim also agrees with Eric that a different word should be used.
All right, so we'll run down the other list and see. Let's fit. If you want to talk about 2.2.27, we're going to talk about that now, and then we'll jump back to 2.77. Tracy?
You're talking about the first one is blower door.
Egress.
Oh, egress. Yeah, we got to call that out very specifically because that's just, it's going to have to be like loft egress, something.
Okay.
mean,
Donnie,
that's what
do you
it
still
is.
have your
It's a
hand up?
loft-
I'm
it's a
sorry,
loft
Christie, go
egress.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's a loft egress, so like, we really have to, if that's gonna, I'm glad you guys brought that up, because that could be, you know, kind of a big deal for us, because that's pretty vital to make sure it's defined as a loft egress. We should have it defined as a loft egress and the size of the opening window opening required. It should be very clear for DIYers. This is one of the mistakes that the DIYers make in the industry, you guys. As a tiny house builder, when we go to festivals, I can't even take Austin to the festivals anymore because he has a meltdown. And all of you building inspectors should not go to look at DIY houses. And I don't mean that with disrespect. It's just that we're coaching them and teaching them that they have to have an egress window in their lofts that are the right size. There was a big misunderstanding in the industry for years where they thought a 24/17 opening, clear opening, was a 24/18 window, right? They didn't realize that that wasn't their actual opening. And so a lot of DIYers made that mistake over the years. And, you know, some of them, you know, have had to learn the hard way and figure out how to fix that. And it's a very expensive problem to fix.
Okay. Donnie, did you have another comment on this?
I rose my hand for the energy portion, but I'll put it down until we start discussing that, I guess.
Anybody else want to discuss 2.2.27? We'll look for a better word.
Well, I
Okay,
heard one person mention egress, another mentioned loft egress. Why don't you guys talk about those terms right now?
okay.
Unless Eric's got something better while he's.
I
So if
mean,
we added to the end of the sentence,
the way we teach it, Sam, this is Tracy. The way we teach it is there needs to be a loft egress window in every sleeping area. Or there needs to be, like, if you have a loft and it's a sleeping loft, you have to have an egress window. That's what we try to teach people. That's what we're trying to correct our industry with. And so that's some of the terminology that we have put out there to try to help correct this problem that we've seen.
Yeah, so Tracy, just to kind of touch on that a little bit, the reason why we had put or accessible in there is so
Mhm.
that it can be accessible from the landing,
Yes.
and you're not having to provide any special mechanism to get to that egress window, because, you know, just if you, let's say you said you had an egress window, but you can access it, right? There'd be no point to have the egress there. So you would
Well,
need
if
to
you
be
have an
able to,
egress window, it's got to be accessible. I see what you're saying. You're like, hey, I think they kind of followed the rules, you know, as far as like, you know, where the placement of those egress windows are. You know, those are the kind of things that we try to teach for people, right? And yeah, we did put the landing area because it gave more room for headers, because you saw people that weren't putting headers, because when you put the egress window in the loft and you calculate the ceiling height from the bottom, we all know it's math. We've talked about this before, right? Comes down to the inch. So, you know, that's why I think we included the landing to be able to allow a little bit more accessibility in the loft for that egress.
I mean, is it as simple as changing it is that to that for tiny homes with a loft and egress window must be included, which can be reached from the loft or the loft landing.
I would define it as a sleeping loft because tiny houses also have storage lofts. So storage lofts in the tiny house world don't typically have, you know, so yes, Sam, they're very small storage lofts, like 2-3 feet. Nobody's putting a bed in there, right? So I would define it as a sleeping loft because you are going to run to a bunch of people trying to throw a mattress in a loft without an egress.
True, we have seen those storage area lofts too, so.
It's very common.
Yep, so sleeping loft egress must be able to be reached from the loft or the loft landing. And would that clear up the word? Is it as simple as changing?
That probably would work.
Wait. Okay. Anybody have a problem with the word reached? Okay,
Sam,
yes.
this is Janine.
Hi, Janine.
Sorry, I was a little late. I got caught up in another meeting this morning. The only thing that I think in order to clean it up, it would be better to say that sleeping lofts require an egress window.
There also appears to be a simple and elegant approach by Justin in the chat.
Justin, I had that same thought too, that saying accessible is redundant. The other option that we had discussed internally was egress from the loft or loft landing must be present for a sleeping loft.
Yeah, this is Eric. I think, I'm sorry, I had my hand up, I wasn't sure. It kind of is redundant because in the appendix, it talks about AQ 105 emergency escape and rescue openings, and it calls out the requirement, and then that's amended to say you can use basically a skylight if it makes that, makes the minimum dimensions. I guess I'd missed the reason for putting that accessible thing in the first place. But it seems like the intent is just to say you can access the emergency escape and rescue opening from the loft landing as well as the loft. So I think we just need to write it that way somehow.
All right, so what I've written down now is egress from the sleeping loft must be present for the loft, from the loft or the loft landing. Is everybody good with that, Tim?
Yeah, I would highly recommend seeing whatever the final language that maybe we're end up today put into the full section to see how it all works. You know, we're talking about one sentence. I don't have my book open. So it's really a challenge to see, you know, kind of Eric's talking about another section or another sentence. And I don't think it's fair to take just this one sentence and not see how it is in the total scope, just to make sure everything works together whenever we get there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I'll try to get that out today. Mike Schmidt, you had your hand up patiently.
Yeah, real quick. I think we're addressing all the things needed from inside the tiny house up through the loft landing. Is there anything that we need to talk about once you exit the loft, like a slide down ladder or a ledge area, or is it basically the user is at their own risk tumbling out of a burning tiny house? So is there no necessary, ladder functionality coming off the other side of the window?
Somebody that's more familiar with the codes is going to have to answer that question for me.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody know?
I just want to throw out there, I think it may be redundant to put the accessible part in there, but there's also provisions in the code for egress, especially from window wells, right? They have maximum seal heights and stuff like that. So although it's, assume that if it's an egress that you should be able to access it without any restrictions. But the code also has sections in there that tell you have to have a certain height, right? So like Mike was saying, can you access it with a ladder? Can you access it with something else? Well, we want to make sure that we put that in there. So that's kind of the intent of making it, it should be accessible, right? So you shouldn't have to have any special tools. It should have some kind of height restriction on there, so you're not, having to put it too high where you have to put a ladder, right? So that's really what the intent is.
Yeah, I've seen, Donnie, some of these tiny house builders, the egress window is really high up on the side of the tiny house, and you could easily go 10 feet, once you exited the window, you could fall 10 feet to the ground. So I'm just wondering whether or not there might be some additional ladders, things on the outside of the tiny house that even though you came out the window, you could grab those little handles and bring yourself down gradually. So that might be a way of accommodating that.
Well, I think, I don't want to confuse being able to reach the egress from the inside of the unit, which is what I think code is requiring. And after they exit, and go out, then I don't know if there's any other codes that address that.
Yeah, I
Janine,
think we got
you
it
had-
on the inside is fine.
Janine, you had your hand up?
Yes, sir. I think we're overthinking this. It just is my gut feeling. We have, as Eric noted, the provisions that emergency escape and rescue windows are required already in the appendix Q. And that will dictate the sill height. It does not dictate that there has to be something on the other side. You can go to any single family residence and be on the second floor, which requires emergency escape and rescue windows out of a bedroom and fall 30 feet.
Right.
I don't think that's a rabbit hole that we need to go down, to be truthful about it. I think we're overthinking it and making it more complicated than it needs to be. So if we leave it as the language says in Appendix Q already, we've already covered all of those bases with sill height and with opening size, and if you can use a skylight or not, and all of those single things. So I just think we're going down a rabbit hole.
So I'll ask the tiny home folks one more time, I guess, Janine, that the history on this was that the loft landing, that there were concerns about putting the appropriately sized egress window in a tiny home that maxed out at 13.6, and they wanted to be able to use the loft landing as part of that egress window area. And so we changed the loft landing heights and added this in. Tracy, you still have your hand up, or?
I do. I agree with Janine and I agree with Eric. I like the way they both said the verbiage. I can personally get out of a loft window egress. It's not pleasant. And hang out outside of it and have a less drop than from my own home in the bed that I sleep in, right? So I don't want to complicate it either. I think that if I'm in a wildfire area or something that my local jurisdiction says you guys have to have some sort of extra plans here, then I think at that point, maybe, that family should be able to, make a good decision and educated choice for themselves.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy.
I'm jumping. It's only a 5 feet drop for me. I'm just kidding.
All right, any other discussion on this one? I think we've got it. I think we'll modify that sentence to be clear for everybody to understand.
I guess I'm not clear, Sam.
Okay.
Are we deleting that sentence or modifying it? And if we're modifying it, what is it going to look like? You might as well hash that out now. But if we're deleting it, then that's actually much simpler. I wasn't clear if people were saying that it was unnecessary because it's all covered in some regard.
Well, I was going with a modification of Justin's comment and was going to change that sentence to read egress from the sleeping loft must be present from the loft or loft landing. To me, that takes care of a couple of things. One, it talks about egress from the sleeping loft as opposed to a storage loft. And two, it takes care of the manufacturers that had a concern on the loft landing height and being able to put an egress window at the loft landing versus in the loft itself. Going back through the history of that, I think that covers everybody's concerns.
You've got Tracy saying in the chat that that's perfect. What do the others think?
There's one vote for perfect. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, that's what we're gonna go with.
Okay.
This, Mike, with respect to the size of the loft window, that's in code, and I don't know that off the top of my head, but it's there is a minimum size for an egress window. Thank you for putting that in there. Okay. Let's go back to 2.77. If you guys, let's have that discussion on air exchanges, mechanical ventilation, whole house mechanical ventilation, air exchanges, and the requirement to be able to prove that it is up to 5 air exchanges in our current rules.
Hey,
Donnie?
Sam,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just have one last little thing because I had a builder ask me about this. And before we get off this egress thing and go to the air exchange, one last thing. One of the builders asked me recently, and there's a conflict because I can't find it in the code, that the egress window has to be on the opposite side of the front door. Is that true?
No,
So if
that is not true.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't find it and they sent me on a rabbit trail. And so I promised them I would bring it up. And I that's all I needed. Thank you.
Donnie and I went through the codes last week, and we could not find the requirement that it goes on the opposite of the front door. Does anybody else, especially my building officials, know if that's not true?
Yeah.
Not true.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Okay, 2.77. I'm going to try and pull that up real quick and see if we can take a look at that.
I think Donnie was going to give some background about this before we switch
Donnie, go ahead.
to the egress discussion.
Yeah, thank you. So part of that discussion last week was, I guess the conflict that it creates for the blower test exempting it. You talk about the whole house ventilation, and if somebody wanted to go opt and use natural ventilation, right? Because both requirements require a blower test to see if it's required. But after talking with Robin, and then looking at the code and rereading it a few times, it actually, a whole house ventilation would be required regardless. But the problem is, well, I guess kind of extend on that a little bit more. A whole house ventilation system would be required regardless, because your blower test have to range between 0 to 5, right? When you're doing a blower test for the amount of CFM for that structure. So if you are required between, I think, climate zones 1 and 2, it's 3, I believe, in the code book, air changes per hour. And then if it's from 5 to 8, it's 5 air changes. Or no, actually it's opposite. Our amendment has it the opposite, 3 to 5. So in the IRC, the actual code, or the IECC, it's 5 air changes per hour from 1 to 2, and 3 air changes per hour, 5 to 8. But it has to be 5 or less. So when you look at the requirements for the whole house ventilation, whenever you have 5 or less air changes per hour, you're required to have a whole house, whole house ventilation system. So regardless, per code, you have to have a whole house ventilation system. But the problem is, if you provide a whole house ventilation system, and you have a leaky house, are you actually causing more problems by exhausting that air from inside the house because you're creating that vacuum inside the home, and you might be pulling in more air into the home, which energy efficiency wise is probably not a good thing, especially in the colder climates. So what we need to do is we need to find that middle ground, or lean toward the direction of what the code says, and you have to have the blower test, or go the opposite direction and still exempt it, but I guess have that concern of whether or not you're pulling in too much air when you're exhausting air with a whole house ventilation system. So that's really what we're stuck on. I think one suggestion I threw out there is, if we keep the exemption there, just add the requirement that if you are going to do that checklist, chances are you're not going to, at least for modular construction, I think it'd be a little easier for tiny home construction. But when you talk about modular construction, continuing that list as an AC item or OMC item, so that we know that it's being completed at the site location, at least the checklist portion. And then once that passes the AC, we can say that from start to finish, the air barrier has been completed and no blow door test is required. And if you're having to do, if you follow that list to the T, there shouldn't be anything else that's required for you to do to meet that air barrier requirement. If you're having to go above and beyond that checklist, then that checklist probably needs to be updated, or additional items added, so that you can meet, I guess, the minimum requirements for air tightness in that structure.
Tracy, you have your hand up, and then Mike, I want to go to your comment about exempting it. Tracy?
Can you come back to me?
I'm sorry?
Can you just come back to me after Mike?
I can. Mike, you want to talk about the comment on exempting? I guess my question is, are you wanting to exempt whole house mechanical ventilation or blower door test to prove the air exchanges?
The blower door test.
So Mike, you're saying leave the rule as is,
Yes,
where you have the option for the prescriptive route and the checklist for those that want to pursue that route versus the performance route and the blower door test, correct?
yeah.
So that means we have a choice of either or?
That's how it's been in the rules for some time. This is actually a brainchild of a certain
But-
Mark Lindsay, who I do not see on this call today.
But it sounded like on the last meeting that it was, folks were saying we had to.
Yeah, you're right, Tracy. There was some discussion at the last meeting about, regardless of whether or not there was the air barrier element checklist that we had talked about, that there was still a requirement to do a blower door test to prove the number of air exchanges. And then there was also discussion about whether or not whole house ventilation was required per code or not. We did not come to a resolution on that. Where we ended up was, and there was also the comment that these are the codes, and we as TAC can make the recommendations we want, and that we can probably exempt it if we wanted to.
Where's this list that Donnie was talking about as far as where's that list at, Donnie? Is that for the whole house ventilation system? Is that a checklist that tells you if you meet that?
Yeah, so if you look in the IECC, there's a checklist there for your air barrier and thermal barrier requirements.
Uh-huh.
It's a table that's in the IECC. So a lot of factories will basically copy and paste that, maybe add additional, a couple additional items in there for their air barrier requirements, but that's the minimum requirements that you have to comply with when it comes to creating that air barrier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which, is there anything on there that the tiny house builders are not doing?
We don't know. We haven't looked at any tiny homes.
Okay, so, okay,
But yeah, I guess to get to Tim Pete's question is, we know that you want to continue to exempt it. But I guess what is the reason for exempting it? I know we had our last discussion, like in Park County, there is it's hard to get somebody out there to do a blow door test. So the Division of Housing does have a blow door test kit that needs to be dusted off a little bit. But we do have one, so it's not like we can't get out there, but that's providing a service, a limited service, because we only have, I think, one or two. And if we're having to do this weekly, I'm not sure how we would be able to accommodate everybody having the Division of Housing do their test for them. So I know that was a concern, is the availability of having a test done, or a testing inspector or a agency to go out there and do these types of tests. So
Yeah,
I know that was a concern.
that's the reason for me to say, I think we should still exempt it, so. Yeah.
And yeah, there was discussion that even Tracy's not being able to get blower door testing in Colorado Springs. And so let me go back down through my people with hands up. Nate, I'll go to you next.
I was, when Donnie, with what Donnie just said about DOH having a testing kit, I was just realizing that we should probably, is this automatically then covered under third-party inspection agencies capability as well? If the NTAs of the world were to able also provide this service, would it be allowed in our current write-up? And if so, and if it's not, we need to add that in.
Yeah, it should be, because it would be an AC item, which third-party agencies have the ability to do.
Okay, so we're covered. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. Janine, did you have something else?
Yes, sir, just very quickly. If we exempt it out with this rulemaking, when the electrical code and the energy code provisions come in August, is that going to put us right back to where blower door test and whole house ventilation are going to be required again? And if that's the case, why are we doing the brain damage to exempt it now?
So I've not been tracking the energy codes real close. I'm gonna ask Mo, maybe if you know. I know in our statute that we have to go to a 2021 or equivalent energy code in January of 25. I don't know if there's new legislation that changes that in our statute or not. Mo, do you know offhand?
Yeah, that's correct. I'll check the date, but it's 2025 for sure. I can't remember if it's January or July. I think it's January. I'll double check that. So we're treated differently than the local jurisdictions, Janine, in that particular statute, House Bill 22-1362 or 1367. I'll look that up too. But in any regard, we have a different timeline and process for it. So we're a little bit differently. Obviously, we want to be cognizant and pay attention to how this is evolving for local jurisdictions. But the reality is we are on a different timeline from them.
Perfect.
And then the other thing too is just to remind people that the exemption has already existed. We're not creating it. This is already currently in rule. So 2.7.7, the way it's written, is what has existed for some time, for the last couple of years. And as I mentioned, there was a brainchild of Mark Lindsay to address the issue of folks not being able to readily get blower door testing completed in the field in a timely, efficient, less costly manner, was to come up with this prescriptive route above. And also there were some changes made to the number of 5 air changes instead of 3 for certain, for climbing zones 5 through 7. So that has been on the books for some time. So the question is, do we keep it as is? If so, what I'm trying to understand is, do we need to create some consistency so people can interpret that there is a conflict with what has been mentioned concerning the whole house ventilation? Or is that a non-issue at all?
Good question. Anybody else want to jump in on that? So that was one of the reasons that we went back to leave it the way it was. But then there was a question on whether the substantive reference on this was the ERI, including the required air exchanges, and how do you meet the air exchanges, for example, blower door. So Mo, I think the gist was we need to clarify this on whether we want blower door or blower door is not required in order to meet state requirements.
Correct. It's required. Let's clarify something else too. It is required if you don't do the prescriptive route. If you cannot demonstrate the checklist was done, then you have to do the blower door test. So in essence, it is required if you don't comply with part A, which is not labeled part A, right? If you comply with part A, then part B is not required, the blower door test. So it depends, right? So it's an either or option currently, right? So I hope people understand the construct of this rule.
Yes, and that's how we've been enforcing it. You're exactly right. If you do this, then you're not required. If you do the checklist, you're not required to do the blower door. If you show up on site and install and haven't completed the checklist, we've required a blower door test.
Bingo. And we should be checking to see if A was done. And if you didn't do A, then guess what? You're doing B. So the question though is, if you did do A, is that an issue with other parts of the code that we need to get clarified to make them consistent, i.e. whole house ventilation? I'm still unclear about that part.
As deleting the second paragraph and adding, if this checklist is not done, then a blower door test is required at the end of the first paragraph.
I don't understand why you would delete the second paragraph. I think you just make it clearer that you're following one of the two exceptions.
Yeah.
You're either following, we just got to rewrite it. You're either following A or B. And if you follow A, right, you have to demonstrate that. Well, that's already covered, I guess. My question is, if you follow A, is that an issue with other parts of the code, the whole house ventilation? Which someone had, I thought said, Donnie perhaps, that part requires a blower door testing no matter what. That's what I'm trying to get understood and clarified.
Okay. I see a lot of hands going up and some going down. Nate, do you still have your hand up? Tracy, did you still have your hand up?
I'll hold tight, but I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing here, right? So I hear what Sam says. He's saying it's A, hit the list, or B. And when you guys say list, you're talking about that IECC list, correct? The res check stuff that all the energy compliance stuff that we did, correct?
It's the quality assurance inspection checklist identified in the rule.
Okay.
Donnie?
Yeah, so it sounds like we want to keep it. So if we're going to keep it, just like Mo said, we want consistency with the, I guess, the completion of it. So let's, the suggestion is still there. If we're going to keep this, we need to make sure that the air barrier is completed. So my suggestion is still there, that the checklist, if it's not completed at the factory, must follow the product to the site location and be completed there. So it should be on the, I guess, the OMC, is that the route we're going, OMC? On-site manufactured?
Yeah, we're
compliance?
gonna come back to that.
Yeah, so let's just say AC for now. It follows, it goes down the AC process and it gets completed from start to finish. We check it off and meet the exemption, right? But if you want to go the blow door route, which I'm kind of want some thought from Janine or these other building officials, Tim, and other stakeholders, but when you go a blow door route, a blow door is required in every compliance method in the IECC, right? So there's 3 compliance methods. You have the prescriptive, you have the performance, and you have the ERI, right? So to me, if we keep that second paragraph there, all it's really doing is saying that you have to comply with the ERI, but then you also have to do a blow door test that allows a little more room for testing. But if you're not going to do the exemption, you might as well just comply with the blow door regular. Either you can still do the prescriptive and still do a blow door test, or you can do the performance and still do a blow door test, or you can go the ERI route and still do a blow door test, because regardless, if you're not going to do the exemption, you still have to do a blow door test, but you still have the 3 options of compliance. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So do we, I guess the question is, do we really need that second paragraph if you're not going to do the exemption? Because you're still having to do a blow door test, but you would still have three methods of compliance. Just doing what the book tells you what to do.
I think you said it very well. There's 3 things. Either A, you complete at the factory, the checklist, the air barrier checklist. 2, you complete on site as an AC item. And neither of those require blower door test. But if you don't do either of those, you're required to do a blower door test to prove the tightness of the home on site, right?
Yes, and if you just do what the book tells you, you have 3 methods to comply using the blower door test.
So the
Performance.
question is, does this wording say that? And I don't know.
It doesn't, and that's why I want to see what like Tim and Janine have to say, because to me, it doesn't really need to be there, because if you're going to do a blower door test, you might as well just do what the book tells you. You have the three ways to comply: prescriptive, performance, or ERI. Instead of saying, if you don't do the prescriptive, now you have to do the ERI, and then you have to do these blower measurements. You already have 3 methods of compliance in the book already for you, instead of just one.
Janine?
Because I think the ERI requires a special calculation, and I think that's what I got from the conversations with Mark Lindsay, is you have to have you have to get those values, and then they have to be computed, and then they'll tell you whether or not you pass or fail, and plus have to do that blower door test and get the results that you need for that. So that's just my suggestion. If we're going to keep the exemption, let's keep the exemption, but let's follow from start to finish. That checklist is an AC if it's not completed at the factory. And then we just delete that bottom paragraph. And then we have the 3 methods of compliance that are in the IECC sections.
Right.
My sentiments exactly. Delete the
Okay.
second paragraph, leave it as is, so that you've got options.
Tim?
I agree. I think Donnie's and Janine both have it the way I
Okay. So we're
understand.
leaving the wording as is. Anybody else have a problem with that? Mo?
Well, you're not leaving the wording as is. What I'm hearing is deleting the second paragraph and leaving the first paragraph as is. Unless I misunderstood. And then my other question is, or comment is, that second paragraph, when you delete it, the other exchange that's embedded in it, the other change that's embedded in it, is changing the air exchanges from 3 to 5 for climate zones 5 through 7. I assume that's a change to the current code. So if you delete that, then you lose that as well. And I'm not sure how important that is. I don't remember this discussion from years ago. So just curious about that as well.
Yeah, to my understanding, the second paragraph just gives a little more buffer in their air change rate. How does it affect? It depends on who you talk to, because the discussion that we had last week is we do a blower test because it's important, right? But the conversation was it's not necessarily having it too tight of a building, but making sure that you have proper ventilation in that structure.
No, I understand all that. My point is, if you delete all of this, then that buffer is no longer there. You're going back to 3. And is
Yeah.
that an issue? That's the question. If it's an issue, then you can't just delete the whole thing. You're gonna have to modify it and keep that part of it. If it's not an issue, then you can delete the whole thing. Just throwing it out there for conversation. And I'm sure the manufacturers have something to say about that, as well as the building officials.
Dr. Meyer?
Yeah, it's probably easier with tiny home, one structure built by one entity. So it's going to be a tight structure more than likely. With our mods in particular, if we have a bunch of items that are stick built on site, your whole house is now tested, not just modular boxes carved out. So that could impact us overall adversely. And then it's the blame game of who built what, where the leaks are, and who fixes it.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, in Broomfield, we routinely see our production builders hitting that 3 ACH or less all the time. And it takes some work to be able to get there, pre-inspections. But I think the point of these things are even smaller, they should be a lot easier. I've amended on a multifamily to go from 3 to 5. And with all the multifamily, they're not getting the 3, but that's a different discussion. They're making under 5, like 3.5 to 4.5. But I think that the 3 is easily attainable.
I just want to throw out there too, I believe in the 2021, they changed everything to 5. So we can also probably do that as well. To say, write that in the second paragraph, take out the ERI part. If you're going to comply with the blower test at a minimum, it's 5 air changes for all climate zones. And then that keeps the buffer there, but it's still, I guess, code compliant to, there's no restrictions on it in the newer code. So why would it make a difference now if we allow 5 air changes for all climate zones? I guess there's that, just throwing that out there. That if you don't do the exemption, then you do a blower test, you meet all the requirements for either whatever option you want, the prescriptive method, performance method, or the ERI method. Either direction you go, at a minimum, or I guess a maximum air changes you want is 5 air changes, because that's what's already in the 2021. Then you don't have to worry about 3 and 5, it's just 5 all around. So we just rewrite the second paragraph to say, if you do not follow the exemption in paragraph 1, then you do the blower test and follow one of the 3 methods of compliance, and then at a maximum 5 air changes per hour.
And I think what I'm hearing and everybody saying is a simple rewrite to clarify. Tracy?
So it sounds like we're required to just do blower tests. So with that being said, Robbie was able to get me a referral to somebody. It is one of the companies that I did call almost 2 months ago. But thankfully, I did get a text and a call back, and we have scheduled a blower test, just so everybody knows. And we're doing that for me for an education purpose, but he's pretty convinced that it's probably going to fall around 1 with the way the houses are built. So we're going to do it. It's going to cost like $300. There's a cost associated with it. I just feel like it's one of those things, again, that we're adding to the checklist of things and costs associated.
Nobody said, what we're discussing is that we still have the exemption there. But if you want,
I like
to do
the
a blower
exemption.
test.
We
yeah,
like
but
the
we're saying-
exemption, but that's not what you guys, you're
Tracy,
saying as
hold
long
on a
as.
second. Like I was saying, you have those 2 options there still. We're just trying to clarify the blower part. If you do want to go the blower route, what I suggested is that instead of doing a 3 and 5 air changes requirement, just across the board, because in the 2021, it allows you 5 air changes per hour, in all climate zones, just writing that in that paragraph, rewriting it so that it says across the board, 5 air changes per hour for all climate zones. If you go the blow door route, just so you don't have to comply with the 3 and the 5 that are in the 2015. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I heard you guys. It sounded like it just, maybe it was a misinterpretation that this wasn't happening already and now it's required. I guess I didn't understand the exemption.
The exemption is the checklist, the prescriptive route in the first paragraph. That's been in existence for a couple of years.
And this works pretty well.
Correct. So as long as manufacturers remember to do it, it's a great option to have. So no one's saying remove that.
No,
It's staying. What we're trying to figure out is how to modify this rule so it doesn't create confusion, it's clear, and doesn't create potential conflict with other parts of the code. So that's what we're talking about.
Yes, and then also by making it just flat, 5 air changes per hour across the board, all structures require mechanical ventilation. So or not mechanical, require a whole house ventilation system. Then you don't have to guess whether or not it's going to be in there regardless, right? Because every blower test is 5 air changes or less. So regardless, across the board, you're still going to be compliant with the whole house ventilation system because it's going to be required anyway. You still get a buffer for your air changes. You don't have to go to 3. It's just 5 across the board. And then you still have your 2 options there. Either you do the prescriptive method for the exemption, or you go the 3 methods of compliance in the IECC for your blower door test method.
Danny, can you write this up so people can see it by the end of this meeting in writing?
Yeah.
And while you're doing that, I would like to hear from the manufacturers responding to that.
You want me to put it in the chat?
By manufacturers, I mean, yes, please. I mean the modular folks, because this doesn't apply, just to be clear to everybody too, this doesn't just apply to tiny homes, this applies to everybody. So we'd love to hear from the manufacturers' response to that, as well as the building officials. I'll say Tim's got his hand up.
Yeah, just a quick comment for the language where you have that first sentence where, and then it says, and then a blower door test is not installed. I think you mean to have is not required.
Sorry, where are you seeing that, Tim? Apologies. Where are you looking?
The highlighted, it says air barrier elements may be installed at the factory or as AC, and then a blower door test you have is not installed, so you don't install a blower door test. I think you meant to say not required, and then it goes on to say when you required it. Is that there?
Yeah, that was my attempt at a rewrite on the fly.
Okay, I was wondering, I was looking at the rule, like, I don't see this language at all.
No, okay, so yeah, changing that to required just would be the concept here.
Yeah, Donnie will play around with this language and send it to all of us in the chat so we can all digest and see if it makes sense to us. But
I have one question. The energy compliance report, which is part of the checklist prescriptive option, who has to complete that? Like, is there a certification required? Like, what is that? You know, certificate of compliance shall be kept on file.
I assume it's the manufacturer, but I don't know.
In the past, it's always been the manufacturer.
You know, because in this case, there's going to be items that happen out in the field. So are they producing that report after verification of the field completed items? Like, is that, I'm just saying, like, is there a certification required to produce their report? Is that a report that NTA can check off the remaining field items and produce a energy compliance certificate?
It would be part of the AC inspection process, I would assume.
Right.
If it's listed as an AC item.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be an AC item. I'm just wondering, like, you know, can I whip up a certificate in Word and send it in saying we're good? Like, I'm just saying, where's the qualification aspect of that? Is there one? John might know. He put his hand up.
John?
Oh, yeah. So our experience, Nate, is the factory starts the paperwork that follows the modular component through the house, right? The res check stuff, manual J if needed, all that stuff. And then it's usually either the homeowner takes a route that says, well, our local counter requires X, so we need to test the whole house in the basement. And so they'll hire that blower door test out on site, or in the case where it maybe just be our 2 boxes on a crawl space, our team out of Omaha will travel to Colorado and do that test. They'll provide, that energy company then provides that documentation that says, here's your testing results.
Right, but John, this is on paragraph 1, there is no blower door test. It's a checklist system. And so that still requires a certificate of compliance to the checklist.
I believe that is verified by our AEA Energy team in Omaha.
So it's by a third party.
Yes, just for reference, that table 402.4.1.1 is the checklist.
Yeah.
So if you look that up in the Energy IECC, that is your checklist.
Does it say who's certified to approve it in that part of the code?
I guess the ICC, they're the ones that approved that table.
No, but what person or entity would be producing the energy compliance report?
Is that an NTA thing?
Energy.
Is that a local? Is that a third party? Is there any limitations to it? Or can we just keep it as is and not worry about it? That's all I'm wondering.
I see. Sorry, I missed that part of the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm trying to type this other thing up here, but that is a good question. Yeah.
I would assume it's whatever third party is hired to make sure that happened on behalf of the manufacturer.
Right. But then we're back into the, well, you can't get that person out in Timbuktu.
But if you're doing ACs, you got to get somebody out there anyway. Or
But that's just an inspection. Yeah, that's just a
or the
code
local
inspection. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So as long as we can make that open to, because they are just checking off visual inspection items.
Yeah, I think
on
for
that list.
purposes of the rule, I think, we probably do need to figure out process-wise how this works and how it should be working, because it's been in place for years. Well, I really wish Mark Lindsay was on this call because, like I said, he came up with this many moons ago. But as far as the rule itself, I think we're okay.
I think we're okay too. I think we can leave it the way it is,
Right.
just understanding that we're gonna have to figure out who can make these certificates.
Correct.
All right, so everybody, now we're back to not changing this, right? Leave it the way it was?
Yes. Your highlighted part you're talking about?
No, I'm getting ready to cut. Leaving it the way it was.
Well, Donnie's working on a
Oh, okay.
he's working to clean it up, but for now,
I just
yeah.
added the suggestion in there, but maybe that certificate can be that checklist that's an AC form, or the AC, right? The AC checklist or the airberry checklist. If that checklist is completed, you are complying with the prescriptive method of our exemption. So I don't know.
Yeah. What if you change that last sentence to say something like an energy compliance report shall be submitted to, versus a certificate and all that stuff. Energy compliance report in compliance with this section shall be submitted to DOH upon completion with the home or something like that. Whatever. I don't think we're splitting hairs here. I don't think it matters.
Okay, so I'm trying to keep track of where we are with this, and it's very similar to the meeting that we had on the 28th. still a little bit all over the board. Donnie, I think you're working on some language.
It's already in there. It's in the chat.
I don't see anything in the
I
chat.
don't see it.
Donnie.
Maybe send it to everyone.
All right, I guess it's direct message. Hold on one second.
Yeah, you want to put it in the Zoom chat so we can all see it. And when you do it, send it to everyone, not just the hosts and panelists, but even, I mean, I'm a host or panelist. I didn't see it.
I don't see it either.
So I'm not sure where you sent it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It automatically selected Tim Pate.
I see it.
Yeah.
Oh, you sent it to Tim Pate.
Yeah.
That's why you got to pay attention to who your receiver is. Before you
Yeah,
hit send.
I don't know why I did that. I never.
Well, that's because if somebody sends something in a chat, for some reason, the default appears to be you replying directly to that person.
I see. Okay.
And Tim Pate must have been the last person, or I don't know. Somehow you had it set up.
I think that's fine, Donnie.
I'm good with that language too.
Looks good to me. What do the manufacturers and the building code officials think?
Do you want to take that certificate part out of the first paragraph?
Yeah,
though?
I would just say provide documentation, instead of a certificate. Because we might run into problems because we've created this own process ourselves. I'm assuming the certificates meet some sort of hurdle that this unique process won't qualify for. So like, I would just say provide documentation upon completion to whoever wants it.
Yeah, the other thing is, are we complete? Are we giving a certificate if we finish the checklist?
No.
I don't think, yeah.
I think if we just take out the certificate part and to say that a copy of the
checklist
is kept on file at the factory, I think that would still be fine.
Yep.
Makes sense to me.
Sounds great.
Let's
All right.
simplify it.
Everybody good?
Good.
Thank you, guys.
Let's send Mark a bill for the hour we spent on this.
Right? Times 20.
It looks like Tim likes it.
All right.
Pasting that into someplace else so I can find it. Okay. Let me pull back up the slide deck then.
Yeah, I'll clean up that message there a little bit, just so it's clear that it's R401.2 of the IECC and not R401.2 of the IRC.
Hey, we're done?
I was like, we are not done.
Nope, not done
We're
yet.
like, no, we're not done. We got a big conversation coming.
Okay, so here's another one that we need to talk about, and that's 4.28. And I reverted to the old red tag language until we work out the responsible parties for OC, AC, OMC. And that's the last thing I want to make sure we are clear on before we leave this meeting, so I can get this document rewritten, is what we're going to call AC. But the concern around on-site compliance or AC, let's use the old term for now, AC, was that the HUD code homes have their own requirement for reporting and correcting deficiencies. And I think that's fine. What we have not done is, in my opinion, to be very clear on AC responsibility. And I know there are different people who are doing it in different ways. The factories sell a unit to a seller, the seller may contract for the AC work. The seller may delegate that to the homeowner. And we're not real clear on where the installation sticker, not the installation sticker, this insignia of approval, the silver sticker, silver insignia goes on when AC is all done and completed and inspected, right? When the unit's completed. So there's different parties doing that. You may also have a developer involved if it's a multifamily complex that's being done. And we had put some draft language in there that it could be the responsible party, that the who is actually doing that work. Looking back at statute, we have to also take a look at who we can hold accountable for completing the unit per the construction drawings, right? And there's really three parties that we can look at: the manufacturer, the seller, and the installer. The installer has limited scope. The seller has everything in statute references back to consumer protection for the seller, which leaves us with the manufacturer. I'm not opposed to looking at some other ways to doing that, and I think it would seem like that the HUD code homes have a process for that regarding substantial completion. I'm not sure what other states are doing to resolve this, but I wanted to throw that back out and have some discussion around this topic. Anybody want to kick us off on this one? Nate?
Surprise. I'm actually, I don't want to talk too much because I kind of want to kick it over to Mo to kind of, I understand that our challenge here, we've talked about this a lot. I don't think we need to go back down the road of, you know, the fact that manufacturers don't complete the projects out on site. Everybody understands that problem that we have in the current construct. I guess where I'd like, if possible, Mo, to kind of give us a recap of statutorily, there's a difference between having oversight over the field completion process, which is clear, and having to assign responsibility. And so I guess if you could kind of maybe give us a summary of statutorily what the statute says in each of those separate areas, that'll help this conversation.
All right, before I jump to that, put a couple of things in the chat. One is related to what we talked about earlier, the energy code. For those of you interested in reading that lovely bill, the link is provided, and I did copy and paste right below it the language that corresponds and verifies what Sam said earlier, that this particular body that regulates modular construction in the state, including our tiny homes, doesn't have to make the switch until, well, you can make this switch anytime it wants, but it can't go past January 1st of 2025. So just something to think about. Now, the other link I'm sending to you was my morning read from this morning, and that's the HUD code. And there is some interesting language in there about on-site completion, which is a term they use for what we're talking about. And in particular, I would recommend scrolling down to subpart M. And for those manufacturers who build HUD code homes, I would suspect you are familiar with this process. What caught my attention There's several things. So I'm going to copy and paste another paragraph that really caught my attention. And that's this paragraph. Hang on one second.
This is HUD code.
This is HUD code. As you can imagine, the state program, modular program, is really built to be similar to the HUD process. There's a lot of similarities. That framework was used to build this out. And that's the framework you see in statute that you were referencing, Nate, about who's responsible. And this verifies what we've been saying all along, that this is modeled after HUD. And HUD makes the manufacturer responsible for the on-site completion, period. I don't see anything. I mean, there might be parts that I'm missing here. I'd love to hear from the manufacturers who build HUD code homes who can say that there's something different. But in my review of it quickly this morning,
It's very clear.
it was clear to me.
Yep.
So historically speaking, it's been this way. It's modeled after HUD, even though we're talking about modular construction. That's how the statute is set up, and that's how we've been following it. I think to deviate from that would require some significant thought and rework, including statutory changes. Mike, you got your hand up.
Yeah, Mo, I think I've said this before. The one thing I want to caution you on is that the manufactured housing law, you're correct, but it also governs the production of almost all the product that's built is apples and oranges to what we're really talking about in the modular law, in the sense that, you know, the vast majority of these are single wides or double wides that have a fixed roof. They're not allowed to have a garage attached. By the definition of a mobile home, the garage has to be self-supporting. You cannot have attached structures to a mobile home. So the only thing I want to point out here is you're talking apples and oranges, and in the HUD code world, alternate construction is much more of a rarity for most people. And if it is done, it's I would call it it's a modeled alternate construction, in the sense that if a factory has a certain design that requires something specifically that's done in the field, they only do it if it's done over and over again. So I understand what you're pointing out with this, but I also think you're talking, you know, even for me, we build some HUD homes here. We don't do any alternate construction because the requirements through the new offsite program, as they've called it the last few years, are extremely cumbersome. So nobody does it. And I mean, I guess in the end, if that's what we're trying to model after, that's fine. But I don't.
That's not right. I just want to clarify something. And I agree with everything you just said, right? Especially how modular has evolved, right? It has evolved tremendously. And that's what we need to get ahead of. What I'm talking about is responding to Nate's direct question, which is the statutory construct, right? How this program was built is very similar to how HUD built its program. Now, if we want to change that, that's fantastic. I think we should spend some time looking at that. But that would require some significant thought, research, and laying and mapping it all out, including potential statutory changes to make it all work, right? That's not going to happen in the next couple hours, is the point I'm trying to make, right? There is another bill that just hit, some of us here are aware of, the land use bill that we referenced in a discussion earlier this morning. And I believe that's Senate Bill 213, which I'll find here in a second and drop it in the chat. Now, that particular bill directs, of course, it still has to go through the legislative process and is subject to change. But right now, the way it's proposed, it identifies this body, the TAC, to work with the Division of Housing to perform a study on this very area, not this very specific area, but on the whole industry, right? And come
What
up
changes
with,
need to be made?
correct, and come up with a report on what changes that the TAC thinks needs to be made to make all this work better. And I think this particular issue is a prime candidate for that, right? But to change it today would be very confusing and difficult to oversee without some more thought, including potential statutory changes. And I think that particular report that's mentioned is a good opportunity to do that.
That's fair.
Perfect. So really put on your thinking caps, because I agree with you, it is apples to oranges. But if we're going to be talking about oranges, then what is the proper framework for ensuring things get done, code compliant, at the plant, in the field, and the responsible parties, and ensure that that happens before something is CO'd. And if something is CO'd without being identified that there's an issue, how is it corrected after the fact, right? So those are just three high-level things we got to look at. And once you drill, I'm sure there might be some other area missing off the top of my head, but we're gonna have to figure out how to drill down from those three as well to ensure that it all makes sense and works together. So that's the next round of this TAC, is getting into that, as well as some other items that we have flagged. But for purposes today, I think we need to move on for now and table that, as much as we all want to address it, because it's not working to everybody's liking currently.
Can I, thank you, Mo. Can I, Sam, could you pull up the red tag language? Maybe put it on the slides.
The old or the current?
Well, I think those are one and the same right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. Stand by.
What I am wondering is that if we can, there's a couple things I want to point out in the red tag language, and Mo, basically what I want to ask you is this part of the language required from a statutory standpoint? And if your answer is no, can we lighten it? And so let me just highlight those things. And then the second item I want to, while he's doing that, and I know we're going to talk about this at the end, is the OMC or the AC or the OC or whatever it is. The issue that I have with OMC is that it focuses the compliance of those on-site items on the manufacturer again, which is accurate in the current construct. But if we redo this, I would probably advocate to change that so that it doesn't misinform people, out in the field on who's responsible for it. I realize in today that is the case, which is to your point, but we might want to think about what that acronym is going to be if we plan on changing the responsibilities down the road. Okay, so
Which is why I recommend sticking with what the language HUD uses, just simply on-site completion.
That's what I like.
The term doesn't
I
mention.
agree, OC.
Yeah,
OC.
just keep it OC, just keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so sorry, I'm leaning in to read.
But which paragraph did you get a question from me? Sorry, I missed that. I was putting in the link for the
4.
land use bill.
4.28. So Sam, is that, I feel like I want to go higher in the document. Sorry, I got to pull it up. Where'd it go?
Say that again, Nate. I'm sorry. Go back.
You go to 4.28, the top. Yeah, there. Thank you. Okay, so first paragraph, the thing that gives everybody concern is the sentence that says all manufacturers must correct any construction code violations within 30 calendar days of inspection. Is that required from a statutory standpoint?
No, that's a rule requirement.
Okay. And then the other one.
Oh, I guess what's your point about it?
My point is that when it's something that they're not in control of, that's a challenge. If it's the furnace got installed wrong by the general contractor.
Mhm.
And so can they install a new furnace in Fairplay, Colorado from Nebraska within 30 days when they didn't install? They're not even, you know, so like that, I'm just telling you, that's one of the items that gives, so I'm wondering if, is there a way to,
You've clearly
edit that?
never have seen us communicating with the factory about these issues, have you?
No,
Mhm.
I have not, and would love,
There's a lot
John
of give
or
and
Mike.
take. Yeah,
okay,
as you can imagine, there are sometimes, man, I would wager sometimes I've seen things take not months, sometimes years to resolve.
right,
But this is setting the understanding that we are requiring to be done in 30 days or less, right? But of course, what is required ultimately is communication between the two parties, right? If a manufacturer goes silent on us in those 30 days and does nothing, doesn't tell us what's going on, doesn't tell us who they're trying to get a hold of, that's not
Mhm.
responding, then we proceed, right?
Right.
If a manufacturer gets to us within those 30 days, hopefully sooner, and says, hey, yeah, it's, you know, this was contracted out to X party,
we got a
X
hold of
party,
them.
exactly, and then blah,
Yeah.
blah, or this is, you know, back ordered, blah, then there's a conversation that occurs, right? I mean, ask Mike and John, how many red tags have we issued? Right?
I know they don't have it often.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're having conversations with them. This is really designed for the worst case scenario where somebody just doesn't do anything.
Can
Doesn't
we,
even
can
try.
we document that ability to have a conversation in this sentence? At the end of it, say extensions are permitted by Division of
Sure.
Housing or something
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, that
Okay.
works. Yeah,
Just
but just so you know,
okay.
but that's what we've been doing.
That's how it happens. I understand.
That's
In
exactly
practice.
how it happens. In practice, it happens all the time. It happens every day.
So some sort of sentence, and we'll wordsmith later, you know, that says something to the effect of, you know, Division of Housings may grant inspections for correction timeline on a case-by-case basis or something like that. And then 4.28.2. Again, this is another item that in administration is entertaining because it might not have been the factory's process that broke down that caused the violation. You know, are they supposed to write up why the HVAC guy put the wrong furnace in? I just don't know how that aspect of this works, and so that's what I was asking
Yeah,
is,
they're you know, just like the HUD language I just sent, they're responsible for this. This work may be contracted out, you know. I can't speak on behalf of the manufacturer how it sets up its process for ensuring the work is done to complete the structure. But ultimately, for us, they're the person we're having that dialogue with because that's the person that's on the hook with us, right? From a contract liability standpoint or a civil standpoint, I guess, between the parties who did the work and should have done it correctly and didn't, that's really up between the manufacturer and them to resolve, right?
right,
If I'm a manufacturer, and I'm not, obviously, and I'm on the hook for this, I would want to make sure that my contracts with the parties that are finishing the work makes it clear that they need to make me whole in the process with the state, right? Just throwing that out there, but I haven't
No.
reviewed these contracts. I don't plan on ever reviewing these contracts, but ultimately we're communicating with the manufacturer and that's who our responsibility is with the current construct of the law. It's up to them to figure out how to get the information to make sure that our part is done so we can move on.
yeah, I think if we add in some language after that 30 days to correct, basically allowing extensions to be granted for circumstances
Yeah,
in general,
we do it all the time.
that would allow for that's the concern that I always have when I read this, is that, you know, how do they necessarily correct something that they didn't do or contract for? Legally, they might not be allowed to go in there and correct something. You have to realize that too, right? Like they don't necessarily have the ability to go in and correct something I mean, that construction defect law in Colorado, for example, like requires that.
Nate, we understand all that. That's why it's
Yeah.
important to have these conversations. But for somebody to say, I have nothing to do with this, go away, I'm going to ignore this, that's not going to work either. We have to figure out who is responsible for it. And we have to go through the manufacturer because that's who's on the record with us.
Okay.
Right.
Janine.
Donnie just put up some good language as far as if you're gonna have to add any language to it. I would be very careful of adding extension language or hard coding any of that, because then everyone will be taking advantage of it, good, bad, or indifferent. So I would be very hesitant to add anything else in there, knowing that DOH has the administrative approval to be able to grant an extension as needed through conversations with that one modular company or manufacturer. So just to err on the side of caution, if you put language in there saying that as granted by DOH, you're going to get every single manufacturer asking for favors on it, and it's just a nightmare, administrative nightmare.
That's a great point, Janine. In fact, it should probably make clear that the extension needs to be requested well in advance of the 30 days. I don't know what that magic number is, but we do get a lot of people who wait till the very end. And the whole point is we're trying to get this resolved as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible. And just delaying it out further doesn't help anybody, really. Doesn't help the consumer, doesn't help us, doesn't help the manufacturer, really. And so we just got to keep it moving.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have problems
So
like.
if you're going to request an extension, you probably should do it in the first 5 days or 10 days. I don't know what is an appropriate number, but you shouldn't wait 30 days to ask for the extension.
I just think whatever the extension is has to be approved by DOH, and
Oh, most certainly. Most certainly.
yeah, and then you get to apply your subjectivity to it, of the situation, because they vary so much. I just think right now, technically, you're not allowed to do that, is the way this rule is written. So I just want to open that and document that, and still keep it 100% in DOH control.
Sounds good.
And I completely agree that we absolutely need to fix this, but I understand.
Okay. Any other thoughts or discussion?
No, Sam, and Mo, I totally agree with what you're saying, because I think we've all realized it's a major undertaking to fix it. I just want to say that until we do get it fixed, we all know that we're going to be kind of running up against the wall constantly of the contradicting transactions and response. I mean, it's just going to be a indefinite deal.
Yeah, no, we understand. That's why we've been trying to work with you guys through it all along. It's not the best process for sure. But this will be the #1 item that we tag for this study.
In regions.
And regions, correct.
Okay,
I'm good.
I'm gonna go back to the slide deck.
Oh, but do we decide on OC?
Oh yeah, let's decide on that real quick. Is everybody okay with OC being on-site construction?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Janine. Everybody else?
Tell you what, if you disagree, raise your hand or say something.
Okay, thank you.
Unanimous.
I'm not changing it anymore. I'm done, right? All right, can everybody see the slide deck again?
Yep.
It's coming up. So the next one was 4.32.5. We changed that last sentence some, but we referenced the rule 7.11, which I think we're going to talk about changing in a second. So we will have to revisit that one after we do Rule 7, okay? The other ones.
Wait, sorry, can you go back? Why is this relying on Rule 7?
Yeah, we're gonna look at the changes to Rule 7 and then come back to this one, 4.32.5.
No, I think this actually supersedes it. The changes are, can you go back?
Yeah, I'm trying. Here we go.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure that this concept was understood, because these changes are going to be reflected in Rule 7. Even though it says it's not subject to Rule 7, just want to make sure that those are consistent. So the concepts are this, right? In order to manufacture anything for the state of Colorado, right? Whether you're in the state or out of the state, whether you're building non-residential or a tiny home and everything in between, right? You have to be a registered manufacturer with us, okay? A certified status, and so that's your basically that's your right to work, operate, if you will, right? And you have a proprietary right to do that once you've earned that right. Once we've issued you that registration, then in order for us to remove that registration or take any kind of action on that registration that would impact your ability to operate in the state at all, right? That would kick in the due process that's mentioned in Rule 7. A certified status is a privilege added to that, okay? You don't need to have it in order to operate in the state, right? If you do earn it, it's a privilege, right? It means we're looking at you less closely, right? And if you're not operating in a way that deserves to retain that privilege, right, what we're putting in here is we can remove that immediately. We don't have to go through the due process, right? Because you still have your ability to perform work in the state of Colorado, right? So that's an important paragraph that I want you to think about carefully. And we're just making Rule 7 changes to really reflect and be consistent with that concept that's in this particular rule. And of course, I still got to run this by the attorney to make sure it's legal, but that's how we're looking at it. So base your right to do business. In order to remove that, right, we're going to court, right? Privilege can be removed more easily, bring you back to the registration status to continue doing your business until such time is determined that you're okay to come back to that privilege status, right? So two different tiers. So if you have any questions or concerns about that, now's the time to unpack that.
What are the, what's the timeline to have clarity on the procedures and rules that go into that evaluation?
I don't think I follow.
Well, you're saying the perform within standards is the sentence you're using to describe that performance. And there is a performance guideline out there that's a very generic, somewhat vague set of rules and procedures for that. Is that what we're going off of is in terms of what we're performing to here?
It's a good question. Did you put into this rule specifics about what would be needed to get back? What would result in falling out of compliance and what would be needed to come back into compliance? I thought that was in the rule.
We did that. The changes that we've made is that we're going to allow third parties to do the certification of manufacturers, and they are going to look at the QA aspects of the organization and review that and make a recommendation to the state, and the state would review the report and grant certified status. And that currently certified factories would continue until their next registration period, and then we would redo that. As far as there's also rules in there saying that if a certified manufacturer does not fails to perform, that they will be put on a higher rate of inspections until improvements are made. And then if they continue to fail to meet expectations, then they would, certified status would be removed. And that the Division of Housing would make that determination, not the third-party agency. I can't quote chapter and verse. Thank you, Nate. But that was what we put in there. And so, Mike, I think your question was specific to how the third-party agencies are going to do that. And they're going to have to register with the division to say, we want to provide certification of manufacturers, and here's our process, and here's what we're going to look at. It was a combination of qualitative, quantitative, and the last 3 units, I believe, were our only guidelines on those, in addition to the performance criteria. Nate? You're muted, Nate.
Thank you. So I think, so 4.32.5 is new, right? It's right now.
Let me go
Like,
back.
that's not in the draft, like the Word document at all. It's not even in there.
This
And
is
so-
Tawny. It's page 30 of the existing rules. It's section 4.7.
Thank you, Tawny. I was killing myself trying to find it. I knew the citation was incorrect. I didn't know which one it was. It's 4.17.
No, it's
No.
not citation. It's in the administrative rules, page
Correct.
30, 4.7.
4.7. I couldn't find it either.
4.17 or 4.7?
4.7.
We don't have
No,
it.
that
we
is
don't
a
have
citation. That's what I was looking for.
In
But
the
we don't-
existing administrative rules that are linked on the site.
Oh, okay. So it got deleted out of the Word document that we have because that ends
Well, but
at
it's-
4.32.
The document that we're looking at is just the red line. It's not the entire document, and everything was renumbered,
Okay.
or at least those sections.
But what is
So-
the new number? Sam, what is the new number? Because when I looked at the one you had posted, it didn't seem to match.
Trying to find that right now.
Okay.
So, but let me
The
go for
citation in the slide is incorrect.
So let me say what I think is happening. So 4.12 discusses how the Division of Housing may remove a certified status from a manufacturer. It
Correct.
lists all sorts of good things. One of the things that we then almost kick out of rule to a separate document, the performance criteria, is a document that if they're not in compliance with, that allows the removal of certification. And so for what I saw on Sam's slide labeled as 4.2325, whatever it was,
Yeah.
that's something that doesn't need to exist separately because 4.12 is the section that addresses that. If it's something we want to add to it, we can add it to that performance criteria monitoring document versus having it in rule.
Yeah, I don't know where that paragraph is from. I actually thought I was talking about 4.12. And I was trying to find that language and see where it was actually falling in 4.12, and I couldn't find it.
Right.
So Sam, where is that paragraph coming from? But if you could bring it back up, I can do some word searches looking at that paragraph. So if you can bring that slide back up, that'd be helpful while you're looking for it
You want the
manually.
slide back up? Okay.
Yeah, because I want to see the paragraph again, so I can see if I can find language from it that's embedded in some
current
other,
rules.
exactly, some other paragraph.
And actually, I'm finding it in the Word doc. It's 4.9 now,
Okay. There
Ah,
is no 4.9.
page 31.
there's a 4.9. Yeah. There it is. If
I'm
after
looking at,
which
what is the name of your
subparagraph?
Word document?
The red line.
331? Yeah, but is it dated 331?
Yes.
Oh, I did find 4.9. I see it now.
Yeah, it used to be 4.7. But which part of it is it? Last sentence. Yeah, I'm just not following this. But to Nate's point, this is all covered in 4.12.
Okay,
Yeah. So I'm not.
Yeah, this may be an old reference and I apologize, guys.
Yeah, I think it just goes away because if we want to add anything in the intent of that thing, we can do it in that performance criteria document.
Correct. So basically, folks, review 4.7 through 4.13 to really understand how this will all work, especially 4.12, which talks about the ability to remove this and why. In the draft redlined version dated 3/31/23. And I know, Sam, you, Nate, and I had talked about all this separately, because you guys appear to maintain the reference to the performance criteria for monitoring manufacturers and third-party inspection agencies. Were there any specific requirements from there that should be pulled down, put in rules?
I did, I added some, that is, and again, I'm not gonna be able to jump right to it, but yes, we did clarify what that document is looking for in the administrative rules. It's not the.
On a very high level. Yeah.
Yeah, on a very high level, yes. 10,000
That is
feet.
in 4.12.6.1 is where he added that after kind of what the document is about.
Okay. So Mike, take a look at that. And if you still think that there are any holes, please let us know. If clarity is still needed. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just for the record, that everybody's understanding is that one of the things that we're going to immediately launch into next is reviewing that performance criteria document with industry to make sure that it, needs to be kind of updated and modernized.
Yeah.
sorry, that's what I was really getting at. So my apologies. I was talking about the
No.
performance guideline document.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought it up because it led us down this path, which is needed. And the other document we really need to take a look at too, even though this doesn't apply to especially newer homes, is the installation manual as well.
Yes.
That's an understatement.
That's gonna be quite the heavy lift, but we got to look at that as well. But I agree that we should do this one first.
We'll do that one first, then the installation handbook, and then staff is already starting to look at all the documents that are going to be changed once we get to the new terminology and everything else that we've got to roll into here.
Perfect.
Okay. Can I go back to the slide deck?
Looks good. Works for me.
All right, can you guys see that now?
Yep.
Okay, so I will fix 4.32.5. I will take that out. I don't think it, I don't know what happened with that at all. The next three bullets were just, we added multiple references to tiny homes in Rule 5, Rule 6, and then at Rule 6.11 and throughout the document. We really added these last, sorry guys, the last bullet there is that everything's payable to the Division of Housing. And Mo, if you think I need to clarify that, if needed to remedy something, I can change that language somewhat.
Yeah, legally, I feel like you're going to say something else than payable. I think you're going to say for the benefit of or something like that.
Okay.
That works. The attorney's gonna go through this too.
Yeah, right. He'll highlight that for the attorney. He'll give you the language.
Yeah.
But we might as well make it easier for him. I like Nate's language.
Okay.
And before you continue on though, you go back. The manufacturers in particular might be interested in this. The link I sent you guys to the land use bill is a whopping 105 pages. So just do a word search for modular, and you'll get to the parts that are really relevant for you. And you'll see in there, besides the study that I mentioned, you will see in there that the bond and escrow requirements for manufacturers, it's being recommended that that be removed, right? So for now, it's still law because this bill is not final and signed into law, but we'll keep an eye on that. If that does become law with that strikeout of those requirements, then we'll of course make sure that the rule is in compliance with the law, okay? And then the other part is you'll see in there, it's made clear that the third-party agency can perform final plan reviews. Approval, correct. So that's been added as well. Tim, to answer your question, because the thought was it didn't make any sense to do so. Most consumers are buying the product from a registered seller who already has those requirements in place. And if a manufacturer decides to sell directly to a consumer, they have to become a registered seller, and then those requirements come into place. So really what it is just adding extra on top of a process that already exists. And if a manufacturer is collecting money from the seller that has already collected it from the homeowner to do its part, that's the cost of doing business. So that's why. And Janine, hopefully it won't make it into law. I don't know which one are you talking about?
She's talking land use.
Oh, well,
Mo, question on if that law is adopted, the land use bill, does that automatically then remove the bonding requirement for manufacturers from our rule? Or is
no, we'd have to remove it, but the timing is good because the legislative session will end the first week of May, which is when your rulemaking hearing is, right? So we'll be paying attention to it. So if we see that the bill has gone through with that language in it,
we'll just throw it out.
Will of course be telling the state housing board, you can just ignore that part. Striking out, exactly. So the timing is actually perfect with regard to that. Great question though.
I was wondering if we could like write in a trigger to our rules that says if, then it's automatically, but that's
no, we'll just strike it out and we'll be paying attention to it. It is a whopper of a bill though. If you have not read it, it's a fascinating bill for the state of Colorado, whether you agree with it or not. And really it's going to take you some time to get through it. It's a lot.
Okay. Rule 7. Mo, this is the whole reason you're here.
Correct. So these changes are just to really reflect what was mentioned earlier. Yep. All this due process has been extended to the privileges and removing those from this part. So the due process is really regarding the proprietary right to do business, which is the registration, that base authorization to do business in the state of Colorado. Of course, I'm going to run this all by the attorney, make sure it makes sense and is legal before anything gets finalized. But want to put it on the record so people can respond to it as part of the rulemaking process, including our own attorneys. So give that some consideration.
Fairly simple changes. Nate?
It just kind of blew my mind for a second that we also have this certification process on the installer side of things. And we've been completely reworking the certification of the factory side of things. Is there any connectivity from an administrative process standpoint between the two programs that we inadvertently affected by redoing the certification of the factory?
I don't think so, because,
Process.
yeah, the certification base process is actually codified in statute for installers.
You're right.
It's
Okay.
not mentioned at all for manufacturers in statute.
Okay.
But great question. I'm glad you asked it.
Okay, if everybody's read this piece, I'm gonna scroll down a little bit. Tracy, you had a question in chat about the registration application. It's on the website. If you go to Division of Housing and Office of Regulatory Oversight, Building Codes and Standards, and scroll down, there'll be a bar across the page about factory registration, and that's where the application is. And that was the end of the changes right there, guys. Any questions on the new Rule 7?
Hi, Tracy. I just pasted the website link for you in the chat.
Thank you, Mo.
But feel free to reach out to Sam, Donnie, if you have any specific questions about anything on the website or that registration form itself.
Okay, any comments before I stop sharing? Okay.
Is this our last TAC meeting?
There's no, because we're going to be doing this a lot more, but for a while, Nate, let's talk about
Okay.
scheduling.
Okay.
First of all, we finished this slide. We talked about responsible party for OMC and oversight insignia placement. We talked about blower door testing and whole house ventilation, and then we went through Rule 7. So here's the latest schedule now, right? Today's April 4th. May 9th will be the rulemaking hearing before the State Housing Board. June 30th is the effective date of the adopted permanent rules. July 31st is the deadline set in statute to regulate tiny homes. Here's what else I have to do, and we addressed that a little bit at the first of the meeting. Once we clean up this version of the rules, we go back into the Secretary of State and amend what we put with a red line version and a no red line version. And then it gets published, and then it goes out to the world, right? In addition, at the same time, there's a couple other departments within the state of Colorado that want to take a look at that, right? So I've got to get that submitted also. In addition to that, I'm going to send it out to that stakeholder list of 900 plus people. I need to work through the comments that they were sending to me from the first set of review to see if I can, in my summary email to that 900 list, say, you know, here's a highlight of the changes that we've made between the 328 version and the 4.5 version. And then send that out for that. We are briefing the State Housing Board in April on what the rulemaking process and the TAC work has been so far. We've got some new members of the State Housing Board, and they've asked for an update on what that process looks like. Mo and I will be doing that together. My question then goes to the group is to, once we start getting those comments back and you see the final version, do we want to have one more TAC before that May 9th meeting or not? That we're pushing pretty tight on time. I'm happy to do it by email if you guys want me to. by the end of the week, I'll have the final draft version that went out to everybody. So that everybody has a chance to look at it. And then if we need to get together again, I guess we could do that on an as needed basis. So Tracy wants to see the final version, then a final meeting, which isn't a bad plan. Janine, you've got your hand up?
Final version, no meeting necessary because we're getting too close to the deadline to be drawing it out any further.
So the only thing that we could change after in another final meeting would be during the State Housing Board hearing itself. If there was any final changes that TAC people or any stakeholder group ask the State Housing Board, Mo, and I've not been through one of these before, so you're going to have to make sure I say this right, is that if there was enough concern at that point in time, we as TAC could probably ask for another tweak, or we could, the TAC could say, if a stakeholder came and said, there's a terrible conflict with this, we want to change this rule now, then they could do that before approval. Is that the way that works, Mo?
Yeah, so and Janine brought a great point as well. Just to clarify that this wouldn't be another meeting between now and April 10th, when the final proposed rules will be published for comment. Okay.
Yeah.
What Sam is referring to is, since a lot was discussed today, right? And you haven't seen what that really looks like. And to Tim's point from earlier, it's always helpful to see how changes really flow through a whole document, right? That you may want just more time to digest it and revisit it at another meeting after everything gets noticed. Just the proposed rules, not any responses to them from the public. That's for the State Housing Board. But what we could do is have you voiced through Sam, right? If something just doesn't look right to you, based on what we've discussed and how it actually ended up being on paper, then there's an opportunity for us to tweak it. What we can't do is visit something that we haven't already visited in the document, right? So it has to be, Rule 7, for example, and you're thinking about it, you're sitting there looking at the proposed changes that we discussed, and you're like, well, wait a minute. This part actually doesn't make any sense for this reason, or it conflicts with something else. We can still recommend to the State Housing Board to make that change and put that on the record as part of the rulemaking hearing. Does that make sense? But you couldn't say, for example, like, I want to create Rule 8, right? Because that wasn't noticed for the rulemaking proceeding. That had to be part of another round of technical advisory committee meetings separate from that rulemaking proceeding.
And I guess that was my concern, Mo, that if we have another meeting after it's already been noticed and sent out, and we decide we want to change anything, even as minor as it might be, are we violating the fact that we've already noticed this? That's my only concern.
No, you would not be. No. Because keep in mind that changes can be made based on what the public also provides in written and verbal testimony at the rulemaking hearing itself. If somebody shows up at the rulemaking hearing and says, I don't like Rule 7 for the following reasons, and that resonates with the board members, they can change it right then and there and adopt it that way.
I was just thinking that if we change the document as the TAC that has already been put out there.
The thing is, you're not changing the document.
Okay.
I think that's, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm fine. It's fine connecting. Nobody, once that document is noticed to the public, it's not going to be changed. What we would be then doing is, if you guys had a meeting afterwards and something needed to be changed, it would be in the form of a separate written recommendation to the State Housing Board that would either be submitted to it in writing or entered into the record verbally or both potentially for its consideration, but it would not modify the document that's being noticed. I'm glad you said something. Sorry that that wasn't made clear earlier.
Tawny, you had a question? You got your hand up?
Yes, really quick, sorry, and I just dropped like all the rules on the floor. Let me see if I can find it. So on page, I want to say 13, or yes, 13 and 14, right around those areas of the red line document. I hope that's the page, but it says like add, edit, renumber. Do you want that in the red line?
No.
So again,
There'll
I'm
be,
looking at,
yeah, there'll be formatting changes made to this before it goes up. Comments won't be included. We will make sure the numbering is correct and sequential, not skipping anything. All that will be done before it gets posted.
Yeah. Tawny, can you send me that reference or a?
it's page 12 through 13 of the 331 red line.
Okay.
Yeah, Sam will accept those. He was making formatting changes and he didn't accept those just to clean the document up. That'll be all cleaned up.
Yeah.
So all people will see is literally the red line, right? What
Yes.
existed and what's been changed. Nothing about formatting and all that stuff. That'll be all removed.
Yeah, I will take all those out, Tawny.
Yeah, all you have to do is just accept it.
Yeah, when I accept it, right?
Just don't accept the red line. That's the important part.
Okay. Nate? Sorry.
Just want to say from all of us that are the volunteers on this whole thing, this was probably the most productive TAC we have ever had in over a decade. And I want to just thank Mo and Sam for all the extra effort that went into this session, not only from the tiny home perspective, but also just from trying to really look at things from a, making it an easier working place, in the industry. So thank you for all the effort, and we look forward to more down the road.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate that. And we've got a good team built now, and we'll keep plugging at this thing. Tawny, I think you don't have your hand up anymore, do you?
I do.
Okay.
I do. And I just want to echo what Nate just said. I just want to recognize all of you at DOH and your willingness to work with industry to make it a better process for everyone. Considering our input and applying it where it makes sense for the betterment of everyone. So I just want to say thank you and acknowledge all of you for that.
You bet. Thanks, Tawny. Tim?
Yeah, I'm going to echo all that, but more coming from an enforcement standpoint, Broomfield and all my fellow colleagues throughout the state. I think this was a long time coming to be able to get this, the tiny home industry, I'll call it regulated, but that's probably the right term, and to make it a more feasible path for providing affordable housing. And I know that our council in specific is going to be very appreciative of being able to get Broomfield to be in a position to start allowing that. I think the stumbling block, as we talked about a lot, is, minimum square footages and everything, but I know that our council is going to be looking at that closely. So great job, everybody. This has been a lot of fun to be a part of. Thanks.
And so Mo, I'll come to you in just a second. And Tim brought up a great point. After the State Housing Board meeting and the adoption of the rules, we're not done. We talked a little bit about the changing of the internal documents. We're still going to be working. Tracy and I have talked a little bit about how we do some of that industry reach out with tiny homes people on what does this really mean to us now as far as submitting construction drawings, manufacturer registration, inspections, what it's a third-party agency, you know, and what's installation handbook look like. All those things we still are going to be working on with the different groups. The same thing, we want to get out in front of all of our the 320 different building departments around the state and say, okay, here's the new stuff, you know, that we're rolling out. Here's how we think it's going to work. And oh, by the way, you know, we know we're going to have some of these legacy tiny homes that you're going to have to deal on a one-on-one basis. And we're happy to help you, tell you what we're looking at. But from this point going forward, this is what you should be looking for. So we've got a lot of work to continue to do. Somebody asked if this was the last TAC meeting. Yeah, kind of, because we did talk also about quarterly stakeholder group meetings and a quarterly TAC meeting going forward. Mo, you had something?
Yeah, no, that's the perfect segue. Yeah, there's things like, you know, remote inspection. There's a definition for it in the rules, but there's nothing that talks about when and how to apply it, right? So that's an example of something that probably needs to be worked out further. And then with regard to future TAC meetings, yeah, I think with the charge that might be coming out of the land use bill and some of these other things that are really left undone, you know, as long as you guys have the appetite, the interest, and of course we will shuttle members in as needed to replace folks that are got too much going on or burned out or just want to move on to something else. But it makes sense to keep this body going for a while. But it'd be good to hear from you guys about, especially as we get into the construction season, right? Where everybody's gonna get busier. You know, what works with the timing wise for you guys, and of course Sam and his team. But lastly, I just wanted to say, you know, since I missed so many meetings, and apologies for that, I got pulled in different directions, and of course Sam has done a fantastic job. But it was interesting to see, being in this meeting for the first time in a long time, that not as many tiny home folks are on this call compared to how we first started. And I just wanted to ask the question for those that are on the TAC and those that are not on the TAC who've been participating throughout. What did you guys think of this process, and was it helpful? We'd just like to hear your thoughts. Tracy, Margarita, you guys want to start? Mike, you guys got something to say?
Margarita, go ahead.
Anyone?
Yeah, no, thank you guys for again doing all this. I was just chatting with Tracy, asking about one specific section on our the administrative rules, and it is on page 92 to 11 about the fire sprinkler systems. I think I sent some comments to Sam a couple of weeks ago, and that's still it's not clear to me if we have to go and install a fire sprinkler system in our tiny homes. That's one of the biggest still question marks for me. But other than that, I think it's a comprehensive, you know, legislation or set of rules that can definitely help us, you know, provide better quality for our public. Yeah.
Thank you,
That's a great,
Margarita.
that's a great question. Before we go to Tracy though, did you guys iron out the sprinkler system requirements? That was actually one of the things I'd fight for.
Yeah,
my document.
So the sprinkler system requirements are if they're required by the local jurisdiction.
Yeah, it's still, I'm sorry to keep going, but yeah, if I don't know if we can just, you know, avoid having this fire sprinkler requirements and just keep, you know, maybe fire rated walls that will be more cost efficient than the system. I don't know, Tracy, if you have any comments about this. I just sent you some comments on the chat.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a concern when we talked about it. We brought it up. I know that the team left its local jurisdictions, which kind of made me nervous, but I mean, because how do you if somebody is, bringing water in because they're in an area where they don't have, direct connection to water, let's say they have a cistern or whatever. I mean, I don't really know how that works with fire sprinkler systems, right? And so that's going to be, it'll probably be a dream killer for tiny houses at some point. I don't know, we're saying it's up to the local jurisdiction, but I don't know what local jurisdictions in Colorado require fire sprinklers. So obviously I'll have to do my due diligence there. And I guess my customers will have to do a due diligence of knowing if they're going into an area with some sort of fire sprinkler requirements.
It is a challenge for not only the manufactured factory-built structure industry, but also for stick-built homes in remote locations too. Janine?
Yeah, just to address the sprinkler issue for a tiny home, if you don't have a well, you can bring a cistern in and, have water stored on site. It only is for a 3-head activation, so it's not every sprinkler head in the structure. So that's kind of how we've been addressing them. We have several areas within Park County that do require sprinkler systems based on subdivision plats as well as size of structure.
Thank you, Janine. Margarita? Oh, your hand went down. Okay.
No, yeah, it was up. So yeah, since mobility is one of our assets on the tiny home industry, again, if we have to install a fire sprinkler system for a specific county, and then this house is moving out, that's something that the house is going to have forever. But we could have, we cannot do the opposite, the other way around, right? We cannot just sell a tiny home without fire sprinkler because it's not required by the county, and then this owner decides to move to a county that requires a fire sprinkler, and then we have to just install that again, or is on her hands now. That's a little bit tricky from my point of view.
Thank you, Margarita. Robin, I see your hand up. Oh, hang on, Robin. You should be able to talk now, Robin.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, guys. Yeah, as far as the sprinkler system goes, I have been building too, and if I was thinking of what was going on in Colorado, and that these houses do move, that I might just rough in the sprinkler and have it so that it could be connected from the outside if necessary. Wouldn't be a real big expense. But I just wanted to say, yeah, it's been a real pleasure to work with everybody. I think working with the lofts and getting that height of the landing down to 26 inches is going to help dramatically. In fact, make it work when it wouldn't work before. And finding how to do a temporary and a permanent foundation, the definition of the chassis, how the trailer manufacturers that do build it for purpose would be able to do that. I think that was a great move. The connections of the utilities, either a quick connect or a hard connection, so that the house could move. I think we've covered a lot of things. I agree. The remote inspections, our definition is in there, and I'm looking at those possibilities being defined when a third party gets approved and they offer, what they want to do and how they want to do it, that might be another possibility. But all in all, it's been a learning process for me, and I really enjoyed chatting with everybody.
Thank you, Robin. And for those that are not watching the chat, Donnie put in the reference to the plumbing system also covers the sprinklers, and it's not a separate system. Tracy, do you still have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, obviously, as one of the tiny house builders on the team, it was a great experience for me personally, just with the knowledge that I got to absorb from everybody and all the expertise. So I'm certainly appreciative for that. My goal is to try to figure out how to translate that to the community, as you kind of brought up, Sam. And that's kind of the next step for me, right? Is actually going through the process from filling out the registration application to, you know, setting up my surety bond, you know, to all of those things, right? We already have a couple of things, you know, in action. But there's, you know, obviously still some more work to do. So I think as we go through that process, as builders and new builders come into this process, I'm kind of excited to see how we, you know, I know it's going to require some process improvement over time, but I feel like if we, you know, continue down this path and working together with the industry, plus, like I said, you know, just with the forums and the documentation and the interaction with you guys, I think that once other builders see that people are doing it successfully, it'll continue to encourage people and not feel so intimidated. We did have a couple of builders feel intimidated and they did drop off over the process. I did a lot of reaching out to try to get people to rejoin and stuff. And I feel like just as we get better at communicating the processes, I feel like people will become more confident in what we did here.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. And I have had several emails from other industry folks too. And you know, I've pointed out that it shouldn't be that hard, it shouldn't be scary, and that there's an opportunity for the industry associations to come up with, you know, what's, and unfortunately every state's going to be a little bit different based on their statutes, right? But there's a real opportunity to get together as a group and come up with what is what a installation handbook will look like for the tiny home that is delivered out your door, right? What's in there? Let us be a part of that. We would love to say, okay, hey, Donnie, Sam, we've come up with something we think will work. Let's get on a call and throw it to us and we'll take a look at it and we'll see if that's going to work. I think we can get that done before July 1 is my goal.
Yeah, that totally works. And we want to support you guys in that. So I've gathered a couple of folks, you know, Robin has volunteered and a couple of other, Brad, myself. So we're working on some stuff with, you know, the trailer manufacturers and some other folks. We'll serve it up to you guys and just look for your guys' guidance on, you know, making it cohesive for everybody.
Perfect. Mo?
Yeah, in response to some of what Tracy just said, and Tracy, thank you so much for doing a lot of outreach yourself. That's fantastic. You know, Eric and myself kind of kickstarted some outreach when the bill was going through the session or right after it went through the session to kind of like identify what's going to happen next. But it makes sense now. Well, not now, but after the rulemaking hearing occurs on May 9th, when we know what the final rules will look like, that Sam engage in outreach with your industry to help answer questions and clarify intent, et cetera, all that fun stuff, and really hear from the industry. There's no better way of, you know, identifying if what you've done makes sense or not without talking directly to people that it impacts. So I'd encourage you to have your industry folks reach out to Sam to organize, you know, association meetings or whatever meetings you guys have. The Tiny Home Festival, I think, is the one that one of the Tiny Home Festivals is the one that Eric and I spoke at. But opportunities like that, please engage with the office to set those up.
Absolutely. I shared with the team that we have a couple festivals coming, and we also do a local tiny house group meetups where different manufacturers will host the meetings. So we'll try to keep you guys, I'll keep you guys posted on all of kind of that good stuff and make sure that you guys have a seat at the table and our presentations and things of that nature. I know I'm going to try to haul Sam along with me to the tiny house festivals because I have a couple presentations I need to do. And at the same time, I think Sam would be a great resource for the industry and the festivals as well. So we'll keep you guys all in loop on that. We appreciate your guys' support.
Thank you, Tracy. Robin, do you still have your hand up? Nope. Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay, good.
I wanted to say that I speak at a lot of the tiny house events, but I'm also putting together a PowerPoint presentation about the Colorado bill and some of the changes in it. And I was wondering if there was a place to educate the other, not just the tiny house industry, but like you said, there were a lot of building departments that still need to get educated on that. Is there a place for someone in the tiny house industry to do a presentation or do some continuing education or something like that?
We did that in January, or February. We did that recently
March.
with Mike Schmidt. Mike was a part of that presentation, and Donnie and I spoke there, and Eric spoke. And so we did that. And so, yeah, we'll continue to look at those opportunities.
You might want to clarify who you spoke to. It was the Colorado chapter of the International Code Council.
Correct.
And it was in March. Yeah.
It was at the March Ed Institute.
It was March.
However, you will be back in June.
Yep. And so, and Robin, like you said, if you're working on a presentation, you need input. I think I texted you over the weekend with the clarification on the definition for temporary foundation, I think it was. You guys reach out to me. I'm happy to look at any slides that you have questions on. And then again, if there's opportunities for us to speak on the process we've gone through as you work with other states, I'm happy to do that too, time permitting, and good Lord willing and the creek doesn't rise, right? So Janine, you got something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we welcome everybody to the June chapter meeting on June 9th in Larimer County at Eric Freed's office in the BOCC chambers, where we'll have Sam and Donnie and hopefully Mo too come up and talk about this legislation that's going in front for the rulemaking for tiny homes and get a lot of input. There's going to be a huge cross-section of our chapters or of our chapter members in the state, cities and counties both. And it's a great opportunity to have any of the tiny home builders come into that as well. Just shoot me an email and I'm more than happy to get it set up for you. Just let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Janine. Okay. Well, I think that's it. I think that's a wrap. Again, thank you everybody for your time. Staff and I will huddle. We'll get these new rules up and out to everybody and reposted. I think we're in a really, really good shape right now. I appreciate everybody, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks all. Have a good one.
Jim, if you want to end the recording, that'd be great.